Welcome to the Armory. Hey!
All right, welcome, brothers. This is episode 2, and we're doing the Armory talk, building battle-ready men for life. And my co-host, Dane Roberson. Dane, what is going on, bro?
Well, man, it's all good. It's blessed to see another day, bro. Too blessed to be depressed, right?
You know, it's interesting because I'm being in Ukraine. Everybody's always asking me, you know, what is it like there, you know, and I'm telling them I live here and I honestly feel safer than I do back in America. How can that be? You got bombs dropping everywhere, and I always joking, you know, because I'm trying to imagine what these Americans think life is like here. Like we're walking down the street and dodging bullets, and you know, and you know, the country is still got probably 35 million people, and it's bigger than the state of Texas in terms of land mass.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, they're skirmishing and their rockets go back and forth. But even if something hits here in Mykolaiv, it's you know, not near here. We hear about it. The biggest irritation is just the what do you call it? The air raid sirens going off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Lana and I sort of look at each other and go, "Oh yeah, there's our daily reminder. You still live in Ukraine."
That's your alarm.
That's right. That's right. Welcome to the day. Oh, it's not alarm. It's ridiculous. I mean, typically we'll get one at 3 a.m. and another one at breakfast time, and then a couple during the day, and they're never followed by an explosion anywhere. So we're trying to figure out what is the purpose of these things. But anyway, that's another story for another day. So anyway, last episode we had just a roundabout conversation about how AI could affect the future of the world.
Right.
A lot of interesting world events happened this week. I've been following some podcasts and an audio book called Conversations with God. That was always interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a lot of directions we could go this week. You have anything top of your mind?
Like you said, there's always something, a lot of ways we can go. I was, you know, I think your journey is just very interesting as far as what you've had to kind of do to manage the stresses and the difficulties that come with, you know, with the move and, you know, and then with, you know, having the business and then going back to the US and then going back over there. And I don't know if, you know, the guys always, I mean, I know you talk to us a lot in the meetings we've had, you know, about a lot of things that have gone on with you and everything, and not trying to bring all that up, but, you know, I think that the strength it takes to rebound in a life situation, whatever that is, the strength it takes to get back up after you've been knocked down, and you, as a man, I think is an interesting subject to kind of discuss, because that's something that you have done very well, in my opinion. You've you know, recovered to some. And it's funny because you've never recovered in your own mind as much as you should have or you could have, right? And we're all like that, right? You know, it's never good enough, right? But you know, I just wanted to take a minute to just maybe talk a little bit about that. I mean, I know I think as men, we have to rebound. We have to be able to take the hit and get back up. There's no scenario where you don't get a hit. You know, there might be a season where you don't get a hit, you know, for a while, but whether it's family loss or loss of people we love, whether it's helping others, even if it's not really ourselves, whether it's our own personal objectives for life, whether it's relationships or whatever. Men have to rebound, and not only have to be rebound, but have the consistency in their own heart to be able to stand up and believe in the day, even though yesterday was really bad. You know, and you know, I think that's an interesting subject because I think so many of us deal with that and have a hard time with that.
Oh, wow. Delicious. You picked a delicious topic. And we could
Part of
camp
my
on
plan.
this for a little while because I think it's relevant. So before I get into what my strategies are, because I don't want to just preach of it, I gotta go over sort of what I observe and what I think most people do.
Mhm,
And I think the first thing that people look at, and I was the same back in the 2000s, right? I mean, 2000s were like unbelievable. I never saw so much money in my life. I was making
mhm,
like 50K a month.
mhm,
I had
mhm.
7 investment properties and I
Mhm,
didn't know what I was doing. You trip over rocks and there's money. It was ridiculous.
mhm.
And then the '08 crash happened. And because we were all stupid and we thought this would last forever, and we didn't really learn financial um, nuance of
Management.
any kind,
Mhm, mhm,
we were totally unprepared for the complete collapse. And then, um, I lost everything: my cars, my houses, my properties. And it took about 2 years to do that. I mean, it wasn't just like a light switch, but
mhm,
by from the '08 crash to about 20 December of 2010. So about January. So about the first of 2011, was that bleeding off, which included, losing my house and all that kind of stuff. And I did not recover well from that. So I'll just say that. And I'm trying to evaluate why. And I talk about, I dedicated like a chapter in my book Legacy to this story. But I had put all of my identity and my security into being able to make money and my stuff, because what felt really good was to go everywhere and it was like, dude, nice car. I go, yeah, I know. I know. I come over to my, 5,500 square foot, prime model home in the community, and I'd go, yeah, it's just the way I roll, done this,
mhm,
but it just feeds the ego. And so all of a sudden when you don't have it, you start asking this question, well, what am I and who am I?
mm,
Um, and we realize we attach, especially early, we start in our 20s. We like, I don't even know what the world's about. I can't figure this out. And it's all very expensive and it's hard work, much harder than I thought. And then you get to your 30s, you go, okay, I got a rhythm. I got there's some money coming. I think I got this now. I think I got this. And he's trying to build something and still party. But when you get to your 40s, it almost seems like everybody universally has a crash of some kind of train wreck. And some people do it in their 30s. I did mine in my 30s. I had several train wrecks in my life.
mhm,
So that's the question. So if you have several train wrecks, then what is life? Are you a failure?
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And so the common thread is, okay, so I did well and then it all crashed. And then I came back again with dream connections and other things,
mhm,
and then that all crashed. But I'm the same common thread through the life story, right?
mhm, mhm,
So I am not my stuff. I am not my victories. I'm not my defeats.
mhm,
So who am I? What am I? What is it all about? And really, it's kind of a meaning of life kind of a thing.
mhm,
And maybe it's my senior wisdom looking back to this old saying, the older you get, the more you realize you want to return to childlike fantasy and wonder of the world.
mhm,
And you
mhm,
make things simple again. So we make things
mhm,
complicated. We make things about competition. We make things
mhm,
about acquiring.
mhm,
And then you realize all that stuff can be gone. And then even those who really get good at the game of acquiring,
mhm,
there's comes this time, and I see this because guys, it'll hit them like guys who become very successful, and they have accolades and they have all this stuff, and they realize their kids are spoiled, and what's going to happen at the end of their day? They're just going to pass on. Here's the trust, and they're gone. The kids, they're not thinking about dad. They're thinking about, oh, what did I get? It's like, what did Santa
mhm,
bring me? And then they go through all the trust stuff. Like, it's like, so why did I do all that? What did I do all that for?
mhm,
You know? And, and then you come to those things where those guys have those 3 regrets at the end of their days. It's like, I wish I would have taken more risks just for the sake of adventure, not been so afraid. Um, I wish I had, taken the opportunity to appreciate each season. because especially I'm in my 20s, and I actually find most guys in their 20s and probably even 30s, they're always in a continual state of dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'll be happy when I get the job. I'll be happy when this happens. And I remember that struggle in my 20s, and I don't even think I was 25 yet. And I had a little kid on the way, and I had one and a second one on the way. And I was just so wrapped in, the financial struggle. I couldn't appreciate, these were the formative years of my kids. I wasn't mentally in that game. I was in this game of like the treadmill. It's got to go. It's got to go. It's got to go. So I guess to answer your question about how I handle stress and how I handle, how I look at what seems to be setbacks, I've learned a few things. And so now I'll kind of get into what I think would work for anybody, not just me, but I'll just tell it for myself. For me, I first of all, I struggle still. So I'm gonna tell you what I do. But the reason this works for me is because I know what it looks like when I do it well, and then it becomes obvious when I'm not doing it well, right? So, and then I have to remind myself of the truth and get back on track to the truth. So, in the truth is, first of all, I've survived everything before this. I'm going to be fine. Okay, fundamentally. And I've talked about this on other teachings, especially with Dr. Glover's groups. I beat these guys in the head with this truth. I love this definition of confidence. It's like this general feeling that everything is going to work out okay, one way or another. And it doesn't mean I know everything or I'm going to do it right, but it'll work out. So chill the F out. Everything is going to work out. So if you have that feeling like everything's going to work out, then you're not afraid to dive into it. Because everything anchors. I was just listening to that book, Conversation with God, and he was at this part where God was talking about that everything, every emotion, every motivation comes down to the underlying, the foundational two rock bottom things. It's either love or fear. At the bottom of the end of the day, you can keep going, well, and this, and I feel this because, and because, and because, and because, and at the end of the day, it's going to come down to either love or fear. And so you have to look at it and go, okay, then what am I afraid of? Right? And if you can look at it and realize, even if that happened, I'll still be breathing. I'll figure out a way to do it. And, and I'm at a place where I have such long-term perspective, which is really insane. I shouldn't. I should be the one freaked out because I'm getting older. But I look at it like, okay, if I got to completely rebuild, and what if it took me 10 years? Do you know how much you can do in 10 years? Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's insane what you can do in 10 years. And I like what, what's the guy's, the business guy, big podcast, young guy, big beard, muscles. It'll come to me in a second. Anyway, one of his things, when he decided to go from just doing the businesses he was doing in he owns acquisition.com. I'll think of his name, Alex Hormozi. So when he said, all right, I want to get into teaching now and I want to do it for free, and the people who qualify, I'll help them with their business, if they get over 3 million, but I'll help everybody get there if they can't. So he's saying, I want to go aggressive. And he hired a YouTube strategist, specifically hired one for different mediums, right? But he says, when I did the YouTube strategist and I knew they were the one, highly recommended, we connected, we vibed, I gave him a 10-year contract. They're like, why would you do a 10-year contract? Because I understand social media is a build. And if I just look at every week, what's the numbers this week, I'm not going to see can't see the forest for the trees. And so I'm at a place where it's like, okay, what can I do in 10 years? And that's a freaking amazing thing. And when you're younger, that's an eternity. No, I can't think of it. It's way too long. You're going to live. You're going to be there anyway. Whatever number 10 years is from now from you will get to that. You're going to get there. You're going to get there. Whatever that number is, how do you want to get there? And it's better thinking about a bolder vision than a less bolder vision. So anyway, So one is I don't get as mucked down anymore with the I'm a terrible failure, is realizing if it went all to zero
Mhm.
and I had to restart everything over again, and it took me 10 years, okay,
Mhm. Mm.
I'll be great in 10
Right.
years. I'll be wildly
Right.
successful, better than ever because I've learned a lot.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
okay, I'll be good then. So let's start investing for Mr. Mark in 10 years. So I think perspective helps. So I think one, understanding everything works out. No, you're not going to die. And just a
Mhm.
general feeling like no matter what happens, it'll work out. It'll work out in the end.
And if you do, then it won't matter anyway.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. If you do actually die, you're not going to care. So there you go. Right.
You're
Excellent.
not gonna care.
Good point. And then you're really not going to care. Yeah. So one, everything works out, and I love that saying is like, everything works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out yet, then it's not the end.
Mhm.
Right. And then the second one is have a longer perspective. There's seasons in life. And honestly, my seasons have probably been decade cycles, peak high, peak low, peak high, peak low.
Mhm.
And, if I can cut it down to 5 years, I'll be really happy. But I'm going to be alive in 10 years.
Mhm.
So I'm really all good with it. The hard thing is getting your peace, though. And this is where I want to come back to for a second.
Mhm.
Because the one thing that you struggle with is your identity thinking, I am a failure.
Right.
And the haunting feelings of the negative worst case what ifs. All right, so in terms of keeping your peace when you're all
Mhm.
freaking out, right? And the only
Mhm.
reason you don't have peace, again, it comes down to that ground root thing of
Mhm.
fear, right? And so what is
Mhm.
exactly I'm fearing? And it's interesting because the fear is one thing I actually I heard from God one time. Just says, don't worry about your reputation. And I thought that was a very odd thing to say, that
Mhm.
I thought I heard that message in my heart. And because we think our reputation is everything, right? We think we should.
Right.
For a good person, we
Right.
should have a great reputation. But I think for
Right.
me, he realized I put my identity into that. And so I was
Mhm.
afraid of what
Mhm.
would people say if I failed? What would happen if
Mhm.
this happened?
Mhm.
And so I think our identity is wrapped up not only in where I am today, that it's not where it was before,
Mhm.
and then it can
Mhm.
look like a failure. But then you this worry about my reputation. Other people think I'm a failure,
Mhm.
because of this. And so the really odd thing that I've come full circle on is don't worry about your reputation. That's feeding the ego.
Mhm.
And one of the things I got from um, I love getting old. My brain doesn't come as sharp as how long did it take me to come up with Alex Hormozy, right, in that conversation? But this one is Chase Hughes. There you go. Didn't take long. I've been loving listening to Chase Hughes recently. And one of the things he says, this guy is not a Christian. He very much understands who God is from a spiritual dynamic. Actually, his doctrine's phenomenal for a guy who's not um, per se a Christian. He studied all of them, but his conclusions are very biblical. I've been shocked. It's really great to see. It's kind of like Andrew Huberman. The guy, as an atheist scientist, came around to where he had to believe there was a God from his scientific discoveries. And then he started testing prayer if there was a God and found getting answers to prayers. It's been a delight to watch him actually, people discovering God without church because they wanted to know and God answers.
Mhm.
I think that's
Mhm.
so freaking brilliant. And honestly, I wish I wish there were more testimonials like that than just the one I went to a church and the guy prayed a sermon and this kind of thing.
Mhm.
Because it's like self discovery. You have to know God for yourself. You have to experience Him, for
Mhm.
yourself. And I think the thing for me in understanding this whole thing about my nerves, my emotions, how do I handle stress, that it comes down to fear. And of course, then the opposite is love. Okay, so the fear is my reputation will be shot. My fear is I'll end up homeless. I'll be bankrupt. I have all these things. All my car will be taken away. And at the end of the day, you go, okay, well, what if they do? I go to all this point.
Mhm.
Like, honestly, if the entire thing completely crashed and I couldn't even, make enough to live here in Ukraine, um, this sounds bizarre, it's 63,
Mhm.
but last year when my dad died, I stayed
Mhm.
with my mom for a month. I lived in her
Mhm.
house. She's alone,
Mhm.
got plenty of room. And
Mhm.
I had that thought, if everything crashed, I could actually rebuild here and start a speaking career. And I would
Mhm.
love speaking, and I can make that a home base at no cost and build a
Mhm.
speaking career. And so all of a
Mhm.
sudden you're realizing if the worst case scenario happened, I could take a shift and I'll be okay.
Mhm.
So then philosophically, I had to come back to this conversation about love. And this is where the Chase Hughes quote comes in, because he says, you have to radically forgive yourself.
Mhm.
Carrying any self condemnation or shame sabotages yourself, because what it does, he's so right about this. He says, what that does is you don't even realize you're projecting this message that there's a part of me I don't want you to know about. I'm ashamed
Mhm.
of it. I'm hiding this piece of me.
Mhm.
And you don't realize how you're projecting that. People feel it. They don't know why they don't trust you, but they can't. They don't know
Mhm.
why. It's because you're carrying shame. He says you have to have radical self forgiveness. You totally screwed that up. You
Mhm.
totally failed. Yeah. Okay. Next.
Mhm.
He says you have
Mhm.
to be so ridiculously self forgiving. So you have to come back to that love. And again, if you come back from any perspective, you talk about, and guys, forgive us, we make biblical references. Sorry, I grew up a pastor's kid, just the way they are. My brother here is a minister.
Yeah, yeah,
In Romans
absolutely.
8, he says,
Yeah.
there is no condemnation
Mhm.
now for
Mhm.
those in God. And so you realize,
Mhm.
okay, so if you're not condemned, then why would we condemn ourselves? And this is what I
Mhm.
find we do. And so again, I have to realize the truth. Brian Bigin's been teaching this. He says the quickest way out of many of these um, psychological pits that we put ourselves in is to rise above it and declare a truth, right?
Mhm.
Okay, wait, right in this moment, I have food.
Mhm.
I'm healthy. Um,
Mhm.
I have
Mhm.
internet. I have
Mhm.
devices that run the internet.
Mhm.
So right in this moment, I'm actually okay. So let's just be here, right? Let's not ruin this by this cascading of fear effect of what could happen, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then finally, the thing for me is in addition to all of that is then I take a step in the progressive direction of being radically optimistic. I
Mhm.
find it this morning. So like sometimes I have these thoughts in my dreams. I can't
Mhm.
control my thoughts, my dreams. I wake up this morning. I woke up at 4 a.m. and I had all those worst case scenario things piling on me again. And it
Mhm.
always came
Mhm.
with guilt or shame and fear.
Mhm.
And then I had to look at them, and I realized for me, and everybody's tool can be different, but for me, the thing that helps me bypass it all is I have a phrase that seems to help me come out of it, and I just go, I am just so happy. I'm just so happy. And
Mhm.
in it, there's an attitude of gratitude. It's like
Mhm.
it's like saying I'm so thankful. I just wow, I'm just so happy. And emotionally, it washes that stuff away and helps put it on a shelf. Because the thing we fight is all the internal shit, and it's the
Mm.
emotions.
Mm.
Um,
It's there's a focus of the eye, right? When I
mhm,
say the eye, I'm talking about your whole your just perspective. And
mhm,
I'm just, I can radically understand that moment where there've been times when I've been up and there's just been times when I've been really down. There's been times when I've made huge mistakes and there's been times when it wasn't my fault. But that moment when you are at your low and you begin to be grateful for the simplicity of things. Hey, I got something to eat. Hey, I have a place to stay. Hey, even if I don't have a place to stay, I was able to get a hotel this night, whatever the case may be. And that focus on gratitude, that focus on the
mhm,
gratitude of where you are, along with, like you say, the forgiveness for the fact that, hey, because of course everything rolls through saying, "Oh, well, you had this and you had that, and you failed, and why did you do that? And maybe you're not smart enough, maybe you whatever the case may be." and just being able to take that moment and say, but I'm still here.
Mhm.
But I'm still here. And
Yeah.
and I haven't and I'm not dead yet. And I'm, and yes, I don't have what I had, or I don't do what I do, or I don't have the title or the company or the business.
Mhm.
But being able to focus at that moment, and of course, and for us, as Christians, that's a gratitude that we relate to God, that we,
Mhm.
thank you, God, for this. I remember being at my lowest one time, and I was just so grateful that I could get $1 burger from whatever it was, and I was like, man, it's the best burger. And, and it's like, they had it for a $2 burger or something like that. And then, I've eaten steak, but so I've learned how to be both, like Paul says, I've learned how to be high, and learned how to be low. I've learned how to endure, and I've learned how to suffer, and I've learned how to be in want and in need, and also in love. Anyway, continue. I wanted to throw that in there.
No, it's perfect. I love that idea. And he says, I love that passage where it says, I've learned how to I've had life with a lot, I've had life with nothing, I've had life with comfort, I've had life with suffering and pain. And in all
Mhm,
things I've learned how to find peace, right? How
mhm,
to find
mhm,
peace.
mhm,
And I remember there's I love this guy. He's doing the circuit right now, this monk out of Germany. I think I mentioned him before, and I'll have to look up his name later because I can't pronounce it. But somebody asked him, he says, what makes you happy? And I love his answer. He goes, I'm not really pursuing happiness. He goes, I pursue peace. And out of that, I think comes joy. And then sometimes I'm happy. And I thought,
mm.
wow, that's very wise, Grasshopper, very wise.
Yeah, right.
Um,
That's right.
but you can always find the peace. So the question is, how quickly can you identify yourself when you're out of peace and find your tools to bring it back?
Mhm,
And part of that is, one, you have to put yourself above your thoughts, above your emotions.
mhm, mhm,
I talk about this in chapter 14 of Legacy. The eternal you is that you as a spirit being are above your thoughts and above your emotions because you can observe them and you
mhm,
can say, I see myself being freaked the hell out. I see
mhm,
myself having these thoughts that are spinning. Dr. Glover teaches about ruminating brain. People can't stop ruminating on a thought. He has all these different great strategies for how to help people get above it. But it starts with understanding that you can see your thoughts ruminating, go, wow, I see that, right? And yes, it emotionally
mhm,
eats you, but you first of all realize you're above them. You're above your emotions. You're above your thoughts. And that
mhm,
helps because sometimes when you can't escape the emotion and it's just freaking the shit out of you and you're just on this
mhm,
spiral, you have to be able to step aside or above and be able to say, they're just emotions.
mhm,
They're just emotions, right?
mhm,
And then you
mhm,
go back to what Brian Bajan says is do a reality check. Okay. I'm alive. I'm okay. I look around my immediate survivor. I don't see any safety threats, right?
mhm,
Temperature controlled. I'm not naked in a cold ice storm. I'm okay.
mhm,
It's like
mhm,
check, check,
mhm,
check, 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 check. And then you just start reality checking yourself to saying, okay, then that emotion is out of control and not based on reality.
mhm,
And bring yourself back to the present. And I think that's healthy. So here's here's a test theory. I want to go in this direction with this thought because, and I want to pass this idea by you. I'm
mhm,
really, you know me. I'm deeply. I mean, I've memorized, most of Paul's letters, and as a high schooler, and I'm deeply
mhm,
entrenched in Christian doctrine. Grew up with it,
mhm, mhm,
and yet I have this very interesting philosophy that's emerging from my personal experience with God. Okay,
mhm,
so I'm going to throw this out there, Pastor.
mhm,
I really have, and this helps me with my peace and to answer your question, how do I handle stress and ups and downs? Okay.
mhm, mhm,
I've really come to the place where I'm not sure that God really cares as much about where I am as much as just doing it with me.
mhm,
I've heard, from him, it's like, pick any direction you want. I'll go with you. Right. and this is where we get this wrapped idea that's kind of messed up with both in finding our spouse and also our purpose in life. It's like God has one person for you, and if you miss it, you're destined for second best the rest of your life. Hey,
Right.
I'm telling you, my own father said this and later apologized for it. But when I was in college, I got my girlfriend pregnant. We got married, and that's when I had my first 3 kids. And I loved her. I would have been with her together, except she left for another relationship 8 years later. We had 3 kids. But anyway, so I got my girlfriend pregnant, and I was at a Christian college. Great example, right? And my dad was so humiliated for himself and angry. He just says, Mark, you'll only have a second best class life compared to what you could have.
Oh, that's so sad.
So I mean, that's where some people say, God is our father. So don't compare it to your earthly father. It's it's not fair. God is not like that.
Yeah.
God doesn't care. I think God's like, look, you're going to screw it up. He knows that, right? So it's like, just whatever happens, he says, I'm with you. And I guess the illustration I give, and I think I mentioned this in my book Legacy, but I think the illustration I give is I kind of see this whole world as sort of this amazing playground he created. You look at the way he intended it for it to be like the Garden of Eden, right? Everything's provided for, perfect environment, no problem with food, total safety. And then God every afternoon comes down and just walks with his kids in the garden. I mean, what a life. And make a note, we'll come back to this later, but it's interesting to me because in the New Testament, the word righteousness, if you go to your Latin, your Strong's Concordance and do the cross references, right, of the original Greek that was used in that word for righteousness, it fascinates me because Jesus says those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will be satisfied, right? And I never like the word because we think people are self-righteous or righteousness is a perfect standard. I don't want to seek perfection. I don't want to be self-righteous. But that's not what the word meant. It's really interesting because if you read examples of other places used, how it's used in the Greek, that word, it means simply righteousness is the condition of how things are supposed to be. And of course, Christians can get extreme on that and go, well, of course, God expects perfection. I go, well, wait. How were things supposed to be? How was the Garden of Eden? That's how things were supposed to be. We screwed it up. Right? Adam and Eve, they screwed the deal, screwed the pooch, or we'd still be living there today. So what was it like in the garden? Right? It was like we had no fear. Everything was about exploration. He gave Adam great tasks. He goes, you got to name all these animals. So put his brain to work, and he had a good job, had a beautiful woman.
He had a great job and a beautiful woman. Yeah.
A beautiful woman. Perfect environment. Health, food, safety, and God was his friend, right?
Right. Walked with them daily. Yeah.
So the question is, if I want to hunger and thirst now for the way things should be, how much of that can I create today? And a lot of it just simply has to do with gratitude. It says, I know that everything's provided for me. God, you always provided for all my needs. God, I always have you as a companion. With you, I'm always safe. And so to me, it's like, it says those who hunger and thirst for those conditions, really today for us, most of it's those conditions of the mind, gratitude, feeling of safety, feeling that our needs are provided for, feeling I can have connection with my higher power. Those people who pursue that will be satisfied. And can you pursue those things when you're at rock bottom, when you've totally crashed out? Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so of course you can.
You can find peace and satisfaction when from the outside world we'll look and say, you have completely crashed and burned. And you go, it's okay. I'm good and I'm going to be good. And I'm not done. I got a lot of years left. I probably got 40 years of life left. So I could relive another adulthood in that time. I'm going to be fine. So thanks for your concern. Appreciate the help, but I'm good.
Thanks. I totally agree with that. I think I have been in many times where I've learned that problems we have this mentality sometimes with God that being with God means that everything works out. Now, I'm not conflicting what you're saying. I'm actually kind of saying that we have this mentality that everything works out all the time, and the all the time part is where we get kind of screwed up. We have this mentality that that it is. For instance, if you're going through a difficult time, it means that either God is mad at you, God has abandoned you. God doesn't care about you because, hey, if God loves me, why am I going through this problem? Why am I going through this difficult time? Why did this happen to me? Now sometimes we can easily trace it back to our own stuff, that we totally caused that. But, but sometimes we have this mentality that we're alone and that no one cares and that if we're going through a difficult time, God is not with us or God doesn't care about us. And I
Mm,
think to me, one of the things that I've, this is literally just kind of coming back to everything you've been saying. I've been in that moment. I remember one of the times me and you were talking and you were saying how sometimes you would sit on your balcony. This is when things were
yeah.
really bad, and you'd have your little guitar or your hookah or something like that, and you just listen, you just feel in the nice cool breeze of the night, and you just talking to God. I mean, just randomly talking to him about all the stuff going on in your life, and that you would find this peace in that moment after everything fell, after all these things blew up, after in some ways you're still kind of fighting off the failure mentality, I failed in the eyes of myself, in the eyes of society, in the eyes of other people, in the eyes of whatever. And then you're coming to this moment where at that moment none of that really matters. That you can just kind of have peace in the fact that you're sitting there with your guitar or your hookah or both, and just talking to God.
Mm. And that comes back to like Eckhart Tolle teaches the power of now. Now
Hmm.
is the only moment in existence. The
Hmm.
past is in your gray cells, of your brain, and however
Hmm.
you've emotionally wired yourself from those events. The future is imagination, and typically you're imagining based on your past. You can't do anything about either one of those. You can't feel happy in the future until you're there.
Hmm.
I tell Lana, I can't kiss you tomorrow until tomorrow. Right? And and so ultimately the present moment is the moment of power. And so everything may absolutely be spiraling out of control, but in this moment, are you okay? In this moment, are you okay?
And why is that so difficult for us as men? I mean, let's talk a little bit about that from
Mhm.
your perspective. I
Sure.
mean, as men, we have a lot of, we have expectations for ourselves, we have expectations of society, we have expectations of especially to be the leader or to be the one in responsible, right? The
Hmm.
responsible person. And then when things crash, why is that so hard on us as men?
Well, again, we have tied our identity. So here's the mistake. And let me answer your question coming full circle. So obviously, and I don't want to say that every negative emotion is a mistake because that's not true.
Right.
I lost
I
my
agree. I
father.
agree.
I lost my father, and there was an appropriate mourning.
Mhm.
Um, However, I think we take pain and turn it into suffering
Mhm.
when we make it identified with who we are. Right?
Mhm.
I am a
Mhm.
failure. I
Mhm.
collapsed. I am in pain. And then the natural thing is whenever we're in pain, for whatever reason, we want to find something to blame or someone to blame. And so
Mhm.
people go both directions. They can
Mhm.
blame this person, they can blame God, they can blame the ex, or they blame themselves. I'm so
Mhm.
shitty. I do this all the time, blah, blah, blah. It's always blame. And I think those are all unhealthy responses within it. Now,
Mhm.
as men, we're trying to be protector and provider. We want to, we have this. If you read Jordan Peterson's, first book, the 12 Rules for Life. The first one he talks about, males have chemically in our brains built into us this hierarchy. We associate who we are based on who other people are and how we are in comparison. And so we have to fight against that, because there's a part where that helped us in the early days of society because it inspired us. I want to be like a chieftain. I want to be like the big warrior. So I will, in a positive way, it motivated us to want to do more. And then, of course, when we get smacked down, it's like, wow, that sucked. I'm not that person yet. And we want to try to climb back up and get better. And so there's a good part of discomfort and dissatisfaction that motivates us to be better. I tell you the other side of the story. When my dad told me you'll never be what you could have been now, you'll always have a second-class life, put something in me that said, I'm going to show you, old man. And so I
just wait and see.
I kicked ass. And by the time I was 25 years old, I was making more money than him. And I'd never forget the pride in that day. And, but it was probably when I was almost 40 before he came back around and told me, he says, I've been very cynical about your path because you didn't get a college education and, you've been bouncing, it seems like, from one job to another. But he says, I've noticed the progression. You've always improved yourself. And now you've got your own business going. And he says, I'm going to leave you alone because obviously what you're doing is working for you.
It's working. Yeah.
It's working for you. Right. So I felt a lot of pride in that. But again, the truly spiritual person would not find pride in that because that's ego. That means I'm feeding my identity as something bigger, but it's part of who we are in this chemically. And I think we have to control it and keep it in a healthy place. This comparison thing can motivate us because I love the guys on top. I want to be just like him, so I'm going to be motivated. Like one of my favorite lines from an athlete was, he says, when I came on this team as a rookie, I looked in the locker room and here's the names of the people that are just like, these star football players, just gods. And he says, I have a goal in my first year as a rookie. I just want to do something that I could even inspire one of them. And I thought that's the good use of the masculine comparison model, that we have this need for hierarchy. It helps us to be able to say, that's what it looks like to be great. And I want to be that. The unhealthy side of that is if we become too identified with the comparison, because you can always find somebody who's better than you and worse than you.
And worse. That's right.
And so you find somebody go, I'm better than that guy. It's like, well, until you meet Elon Musk, and it's like, then you're nobody. Now I'm nobody, right? So it's like, that's not true. The Buddhists say comparison is the source of all suffering, right? So that's crap. So I think for men, when we crash and burn, it feels so bad. Realize part of that's chemically built in your brain. It's like we want to understand where we fit in the hierarchy of our circle, whatever that is. And we feel embarrassed when we crash. We feel ego gets involved. We say, I'm embarrassed. I embarrass myself in front of all these people. But I think the healthy thing is just to realize it's part of my journey. And it just, now I know what it really looks like. And now I have more experience to get there faster. Radical self-forgiveness has to come into play. And so here I come full circle to the meaning of life thing that I talked about. So what is all of this life about? Because contrary to what most gurus say today, you have to find your purpose, your one thing. It's like, I think that it's great if you can find things that inspire you and make you feel great that you do. And if you develop expertise on a path, you can continue down that path and continue to improve and do better on it. But if you say, this is my one thing, my purpose, it's like, okay, well, what if you each reach the pinnacle of that? This is where we have problems, right? You go, now what?
Now what?
Yeah. And And I have to confess, on a very sad note, when I had crashed and burned and I realized I lost dream connections, I was financially burning out, and I look back at dream connections and it was such a blessing, because there's so
Mhm,
much I'd done good in the
mhm,
world, right?
mhm, mhm.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
for
you touched a lot of lives.
hundreds of
Yeah,
people, thousands
yeah,
probably,
yeah.
including all the teachings.
Mhm.
And I'd created happiness, created generations. I even had one
Legacy.
story, legacy. I think I even told you
Mhm,
the guy who named his son after me. I mean, it
mhm,
was
mhm,
crazy stuff, right? Crazy stuff.
mhm,
So when I
mhm,
was at the bottom, I remember having a prayer to God when I was just tired, and I was going,
mhm.
God, I've kind of done my thing. I did good in the world. People are better because I was here. Can I go home now? I'm just done. I'm ready to check out. Take me home. I'm
Yeah,
this is
yeah, yeah,
this stuff is, I
yeah.
don't know where it's going. I don't feel it. I don't see it. And of course, I would never do anything to myself, but I was saying, but if you want to, God, I'm totally good. Bring me home. And and so that's why I think there's that can't be the right answer. You can't say there's one purpose, because then what if you miss it?
Absolutely.
Or what if you miss it? Or what if you fulfill it?
Yeah.
And so
But I don't even think that's biblical, because I mean, if you look at it, if you looked at the greats, Moses, you look at Abraham, you look at the disciples, there's arcs in there's stories. There's Joseph, the kid, and then he gets sold to slavery, and and his
right.
brothers betray him, and then he finally starts doing a little better and becomes Potiphar's, and then he gets accused of raping, so then he goes to jail for all this time, and then and then and it's just this up and this down and this up and this down, but in that journey, everything he went through played a part in helping him to build up to what God ultimately wanted him to do.
Mhm.
So it wasn't so much that God had a singular plan for where he was going to go and he went directly there. God had purpose for him later, but everything he went through, including the setbacks, including the problems, including the devastating things that happened to him, all built things inside of it. Like, one of the things I gave one time in the lesson was, if he had never been in Potiphar's house, he would never understand how to deal, because Potiphar was a high ranking official. So he had to probably understand the language. He had to understand the logistics. He had to be able and he got good at that. And then God said, okay, you're good at that. Now, and then he ended up in jail, where he got to be able to, but they put him in charge of the jail. So he became big into the logistics. The same logistics that he used after he heard the Pharaoh's dream. He used a lot of those same logistics to be able to figure out how to store grain during the good years, right, for the famine. So
Mhm.
I just bring that back to what you're saying, that in this time there isn't a everybody kind of says that you have a purpose, but that purpose, you don't really see the whole purpose. You don't know, but not only are you doing it in little ways along the way, and God may take you down the road and then wipe that whole scenario off, and you think, well, I'm a failure, but then God is cleaning you up because He's getting
Yeah.
ready to take you in another direction, and you can't carry that baggage there.
It's funny. So I'm a little even more detached than that. So for example, Joseph may have gone on after the story we know of, because we
Hmm.
don't see that he got married or he had kids, and it may find out that he did his season in his job and he took a early well-deserved retirement and spent the rest of the time raising grandkids. We don't know. And he just became a community leader in his neighborhood and did a neighborhood watch. But wherever
Hmm.
he was, that was his life. So he had his life with
Hmm.
his dad. He had his life
Hmm.
where he worked for Potiphar. He had his life where he actually excelled in the prison system, which got him the
Hmm.
role to go meet the Pharaoh. And
Hmm.
so in every stage was his life. See,
That's
I
right.
think the mistake we make is thinking like, this is not my life. This is building to something. So I can't wait till that something comes.
Hmm.
And and it's like, okay, well, this is your life. First of all, the best thing you can do is accept it.
Hmm.
So when life sucks, the first thing you do, and you get this from Colonel Stockdale. Remember the guy
Hmm.
who ran with Ross Perot as his VP? He actually wrote a really good book, and I haven't read it, but I've heard other people quoting from it. And he talked about his experience in Vietnam prison camp. And I think he was there for like 7 years. I can't even imagine living in that environment, right? And he says,
Mhm.
it's interestingly enough, people ask me, who are the ones who survived and who didn't make it? And he said, ironically, the ones who didn't make it were the optimists. And you're going, what? No, don't tell me that. I love being an optimist. Don't tell me I wouldn't make it. But he explains, he goes, no, look, the optimists go, it's okay. It's okay. We're going to be out of here by Christmas. It's okay. Just hang in there. And Christmas comes and goes. You're not out of there. Okay. Well, by Easter, we'll be out of here by Easter. And then Easter comes and goes. And he goes, those people eventually get to a point where they just give up. And then when they give up, their body gives up and they go.
Mhm.
He says, what we did every day is we woke up, says, I'm in a freaking prison camp. It sucks. There's going to be pain and misery. Okay. So other than that, how can I make today as best as I can? And I think it's the radical acceptance of the suck, but not wallowing it, saying, given that's my circumstance, how can I still make it as best I can? That is how you get through the suck. That's how you get through the valley. And I was there where literally every day, that's the best I could do, would get up and say, this really painful. This really sucks. This is nowhere where I want to be, but it is where I am. So what can I do today to make today as enjoyable as I can, or productive as I can, or whatever the question may be?
Mhm.
And I think that, the question of yes, we learn a little thing, we grow some wisdom and experience with each place we're at. I
Mhm.
don't know that each
Each
one
season, yeah.
has to be on a trajectory that leads to something. Like you look at the life of Joseph and you go, okay, those
Mhm.
things led up to him being perfectly in line to be this guy for Pharaoh, then who could save the world, right? So you can see the
Mhm. Mhm.
pieces. I
Mhm.
don't know that we have to be on a trajectory for that kind of a story, but I think at any time we can take our story and go multiple directions. So, in other words, another Chase Hughes thing he talks about, he says, imagine where you are right now. You make a decision today. I'm going to go take a course on AI development or whatever. Okay, I'm going to go learn that. And all of a sudden, in that, something fires you up, and then you get a
Mhm.
job opportunity. Now you're working from us, right? Changes your whole
Mhm.
life trajectory. He goes,
Mhm.
well, what if you didn't choose that? What if you just kept doing what you're doing? Okay, you have another life trajectory. And he
Mhm.
says, at any moment in time, there are probably dozens of different directions
Mhm.
viably, you could take your life. And we
Mhm.
look in our past saying, what if I'd only done this? What if I'd only done that? Right? Totally different
Mhm.
life trajectory.
Mhm.
And we have to realize it doesn't make one bad or good. It just means they're all available to us. And going forward, they're all available to us.
Mhm.
And so the thing that I like what Chase Hughes said is, he goes, pick one that really sounds cool. Look at all the different life trajectories you go. Pick one that sounds cool. Put yourself there, live it, feel it. And then what would be the next steps to walk on that path? And it's almost like the train coming to those tracks where it all of a sudden splinters out to all those different railroad tracks to go different directions. You just got to pull a lever and it picks the course you're on. And so I think that at any time, we can go any number of ways, and it doesn't deviate us from God's plan for our life. He'll still walk along
Mhm.
by us, hold us on the hand. And I see him more as he wants to see what we do with this world he gave us.
Mhm.
He created this playground. It's like you let your kids go out and play, and you're not too worried about them. They got friends to play, where they play tag or they play something else. They're going to go play. And if they fall down and hurt themselves, it's part of being a kid, right? So,
That's right.
but it's like, I hope they go explore the world. I hope they get some bruises, but you know, I want them to enjoy this this thing I created for them. So I think life is a matter of what can I do today with what I've been given, and what can I do to experience more of what's been created for me to experience.
Mhm.
And then I don't think you can go wrong. There's no bad answer. There's no bad path. There's no ultimate failure. And if
Well,
something gets excited, go for it.
I was gonna ask you on that note, you talk to hundreds, many, many hundreds of men, through the Dream Connection times and before and after, you know, and you constantly would have to deal with sometimes, people trying to get people to move out of to expand what is possible,
Mhm.
right? So here they are, this guy, and they're not happy with their life, or maybe they are happy, but they're just, in the romantic side, they just not really seeing what they're trying to see, and they have all these reasons why it's not going to work. I'm too old, I'm too rich, I'm too poor, and whatever the case may be, too young,
Mhm.
whatever. And you had to reach into them and say, hey, uh, you could have a beautiful life with this beautiful Ukrainian woman, or
Mhm.
whichever one that the Lord leads you to. And and uh, how was that? Because I mean, I think that kind of relates to you. You probably had to see a lot of people that were dealing with what they thought was kind of the end of the story,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden, you said, "Hey, here's another door you could take."
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about the dream connection days because a lot of the times what I was trying to get guys to do is overcome themselves to do what they really wanted, you
Mm,
know, because
mhm,
nobody comes to dream connections without this already knowing inside, I would love to have a Ukrainian wife. I see
mhm,
the examples. Something in me says there's something there for me. And so then what keeps people from pursuing that is always the noise in their own heads telling them,
mhm,
nah, it's not for me. It's not really going to work. It works for all these
mhm,
people, but not for me. Maybe later, maybe another time. And you just got to smack them and just go, there is no tomorrow. There is no other time. And if it's in your heart, it's yours. If this is
mhm,
something that's on you, then it's already waiting for you. Quit making her wait. And so I just try to
mhm,
help guys overcome, their own life is hard enough. Don't be hard on yourself. Right.
mhm,
So it's
mhm,
like, quit getting in your own way. Um, Dave, David Bayer, another guy I like listening to, and he says, the secret formula for life is desire and desire with removed obstacles equals desired outcomes. So you have to decide, what are the obstacles, right? So what do you
mhm,
want? Okay, what's in the way? Typically, it's you causing a blockage.
mhm,
So one of the things Chase Hughes says is that love is our natural state of being. When we live in fear, we create that. So how do we get fear out of the way? So what's
mhm,
already there, we don't have to pursue love. We have to get the other
mhm,
shit out of the way so it can come out and we can experience it.
mhm,
So I think all those things, it's like the woman you want, the life you want, it's all about emotional freedom. Just go and pursue the desires of your heart and understand when fear comes up that it's a lie and it's not real. The real state is love.
Yeah, I think in my own life, that has been my greatest strength, is to know that in the end, when everything's blowing up, and this is where normally people kind of turn and say, well, maybe God's mad at me, maybe God doesn't love me, maybe there is no God. You know what I'm saying? And
Hmm.
they kind of get to that point because they're like, well, what I expected, what I projected life to be, or what I thought my purpose was, to your point, it didn't work out that way. So maybe I missed the whole boat, maybe I'm misunderstanding. But for me, I've learned that through the ups and the downs, the trials, and the pivoting that has to get done to stay on your feet, because you do have to pivot, and being able to, like you said, if everything burns down, okay. I built it before. And that's one of the things that I always love about what you talk about with, this it didn't happen one time, right? There were peaks and lows through the whole thing.
Hmm.
So every time you make it through that peak and low, it changes you to understand what's really important and what's really valuable. And then you incorporate that into the next peak, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. With that, I think that's a great place to start. And again, I hope if, brother, wherever you're watching this conversation, if you're at a real low, you go and grab some ideas here just from our story and what's shared, because I think there's some real wisdom there. Because to get through any setback. And if you're not in a setback, you will have one later. It's life.
It's coming.
And you want to go back and remember these tips.
Right.
But the most important thing is to realize you are above your circumstances wherever you are. Accept this is what it is. It sucks, but how can I make the most of it? Realize life will have seasons. So, and keep your ego in check. You're not identified with your stuff. So if you lose something, you didn't lose you. You're not identified with it. And
Stuff can be replaced.
all stuff can be replaced. And keep the big picture in mind. You're going to be around a while, and you'll have it back and more. So it's not comfortable. Nobody's saying it is, but still find a way to find your happy place. When you feel the emotions come, like for me, I emotionally just go back and go, you know what? I love my life. I love my life. And that sounds like a lie, because this moment, I don't love all the circumstances. I love that I was given life. I love that I was given life. I was given the opportunity.
And you're still here.
And I'm still here. And I'll go try something else. This year, I'll go experience something new. This whole last year, was an incredible experience. I was not expecting, right? But meeting Lana, coming to Ukraine, spending time in Odessa and Bucharest, and then in Croatia, and all these things were gifts. It was just such a beautiful thing. Create such beautiful memories. And I've gotten in better health, which is insane for my age. And so it's like this next year will be great too. And even when it sucks, you can find things that are really, really, really cool. And
you can always find it. And God loves you. That's the thing that I add to that in the end, God is not God loves you, and He wants to walk with you like He did with Adam in the garden. He wants to walk with you, and even in the darkest times, the sun, I used to kind of talk to myself about that you can have the night, but eventually the sun will shine. Like it's not going to stay night forever.
Correct.
Now we can keep ourselves in the night, but there always going to be that next time, that sunshine, that if we can keep going and like you said, just embrace the suck and move on until the sun shines,
Yeah. And guys, if you're not a member of the Armory, come join us. We're going to be building this up, and it's going to go places. So this is a place to be, and we want to support each other. And that's where we're going to hang out and do that. So the link is below, thearmory.mn.co, and that's all it takes. And we will see you there. And my brother, I will see you next week.
Till next week, brother.
Have a great one.